Hello, sir.
Dan, Neil Lyman. Listen, our plane got in early. I was thinking about scouting the site.
Oh, jeez!
How's everything on your end?
The late 2000s to early 2010s, what a time to be alive. The era of YouTube poops, Annoying Orange, Fred, Justin Bieber's hit new single Baby, and whatever the hell this haircut was, which for some reason dudes thought looked good back then, I don't know how. But most importantly, it was the height of critically panned family comedies which people eventually forgot even existed in the first place. Of course, out of this hyper-specific assortment of films, I'm going to be talking about Furry Vengeance. While the title sounds uncomfortably suspect, and hell, the poster certainly isn't doing it any favours, I don't even want to know what's going on between Brendan and the bear. Let me assure you, this is nothing more than a wholesome family comedy. A wholesome family comedy that was universally hated by almost everyone who happened to bear witness to its ungraceful attempts at, well, everything. Seldom will you find a single soul praising this film. Critics hated it for its obnoxious humour and insufferable dialogue, and audiences hated it for its ham-fisted, eco-friendly messaging and crude stereotypes. I mean, etc, you get the point. And if I'm being honest, every criticism is more than likely 100% true. This isn't a Chappie type deal where it was an underrated gem that everyone was wrong about. Whether it's the bland to crappy cinematography or the hilariously mishandled budget, Furry Vengeance is genuinely a bad film in almost every conceivable way. However, in spite of all that, I somehow found myself enjoying it. I finished the film with a smile on my face, having had a good time. Not even ironically on a so bad it's good level. The film's usage of slapstick comedy is actually pretty funny, most of which is comedically well timed, alongside a couple gags that land decently well. Granted, there's an equal amount of cringe alongside it, considering this is a family comedy after all, but still. There were enough earned laughs to the point where I was enjoying it, which I hated. I hated the fact that I got any semblance of joy from this turd, not only because it's bad, but because it was also a half-assed cash-in for the cast and crew. On top of all that, it was a miserable experience for Brendan Fraser himself, which we'll get into a bit later on. Though despite that fact, like Atlas lifting the heavens upon his shoulders, Brendan Fraser carries the majority of the movie. 99% of the positive aspects come directly from him, and this is supposed to be one of his worst roles. If anything, it's a testament to how talented an actor he is, shining amongst a sea of shite. Combine all that with a fair dosage of nostalgia, having watched this movie a gazillion times as a kid, and you've got yourself a by all means shit film that somehow still manages to cast its charming spell on me. And if you'll humour me for the next however long this video turns out to be, you'll see the full extent of how crappy Furry Vengeance is, but also why some of the humour, especially from Brendan, is executed surprisingly well, to the point where it might be worth a second look. At the very least to gawk at the magnitude of shittery on display. Now usually I go through the plot of a given film in these videos, and I suppose I'm going to do the same here, but like, there really isn't one. I mean there is, but it's practically paper thin. Essentially the core premise is that a real estate developer named Dan Sanders, played by Brendan Fraser, is ordered to convert the forest of Rocky Springs into a residential development on the orders of his boss, Neil Lyman, played by Ken Jeong, much to the chagrin of his family who didn't want to move there in the first place. On top of being constantly ignored by Dan, who was too busy being consumed by the copious amounts of work. Yeah, it's basically the workaholic father learns to appreciate his family type of narrative. There's thousands of movies with this exact premise. Now, Furry Vengeance utilising this trope wouldn't inherently be a bad thing, if there was a unique twist on the formula, or hell, if it was just executed successfully. But spoiler alert, this film doesn't tick either of those boxes. So diving into the half-baked narrative, the film opens on a sports car speeding down the road of a lavish countryside known as Rocky Springs, almost hitting a squirrel in the process. It turns out this is the guy who was supposed to take over Dan's role as the head of development for the Rocky Springs residential area. Keyword supposed to. It's here where we see that the animals are capable of higher intelligence, led by a mischievous raccoon who's the brains of the operation. Thankfully the animals don't actually talk in this film, which is, you know, whew, dodged a bullet there. I've seen enough terrible films with talking animals to last me a lifetime, like Marmaduke, and the Cats and Dogs, Zookeeper, oh god. Oh god, the trauma's coming back. No. Instead, the animals communicate with each other using noises and grunts, you know, as you'd expect. Of course, that's not enough for the brain dead babies at home watching, so they also communicate to the audience via speech bubbles, which, can I just say, is incredibly lame. Seriously, it would have been a lot more intriguing if the audience had to infer what the animals are saying through their usual array of noises, grunts and gestures. Anyways, after the squirrel was nearly murdered, the raccoon signals the weasel to deploy a giant boulder that smashes right into the speeding car. Both of which are apparently made of paper mache, as the car seemingly sustains zero damage once knocked off the road. If that wasn't enough, the raccoon decides to give him back the cigar he threw out the window, causing the bloke to fall off the cliff, dying in a gory explosion, instantly killing him. It's now been established that these animals don't fuck around. Shortly thereafter, we're introduced to Dan, our lovely protagonist, who's currently in charge of the Rocky Springs development project, which seems to be going decently well. Along with him is his family, who don't want to be there one iota. Still experiencing homesickness after months away from their hometown of Chicago. Not sure why they prefer Chicago over literal lush nature backdrops, but whatever. It's another day of the grind, and so Dan heads off to meet with his boss, Neil Lyman, the CEO of Lyman Enterprises, but not before the raccoon sneaks into the sandwich basket with sandwiches for the Dan's boss, who we later find out doesn't like sandwiches. So during the meeting, Lyman reveals that he wants Dan to not only tear down a small section of nature, but the entire bloody forest, forcing him to stay at Rocky Springs for another 4 years. Way longer than what he originally promised his family, so naturally they get pissed. Not even the Nintendo Wii is enough to win their favour. That's how you know the situation's gone critical.
Who wants a new Wii? Huh?
The raccoon, having eavesdropped on the meeting, hears word of the plan to wipe out the entire forest and gathers the other animals to inform them about their plans. Together they plot to stop the development of Rocky Springs by making Dan's life a living hell. That's pretty much the setup for Furry Vengeance. The majority of the film revolves around Dan's interaction with the animals as they subject him to all kinds of abuse, be it farting in his face, pushing him off cliffs, putting nuts in his cereal, taking his clothes, I mean you name it, they've probably done it. And when I say interactions, I'm doing so with heavy quotation marks. You see, Brendan and the entire cast had almost zero real meetings or scenes with the trained stage animals. Every scene you see with them is done using puppets and or composite shots to achieve the feel of both the animal and human worlds colliding. If the rock hitting the car earlier on wasn't a dead giveaway, then I'm sorry to tell you that this movie was made on the cheap. And I mean like, ultra cheap. Now in fairness, the results look most of the time pretty serviceable. If you told people that these were genuine shoots together, I think most would be none the wiser. However, in saying that, the cheapness manages to evoke itself in other ways far more jarring than this. The prime example being the cinematography. You can tell they really liked this boulder contraption they made, as they use it multiple times in the film. And every time we see it, it's the exact same composition, editing and everything. On at least one occasion we see stock footage being used when Dan is driving to work, and that's just the one I noticed. I suppose a helicopter just wasn't in the budget. In a scene where we see a bunch of skunks climbing into Dan's car, they just reuse the same shot of 2 skunks entering and play it on a loop. Also, take a look at this night to day transition. Jesus. It's literally the most basic cross dissolve you've ever seen. It takes 2 seconds to do. I use these in my videos all the time. Even moving past all these cheap shortcuts, the film is just boringly shot. Yeah, I wasn't expecting Dune or John Wick when watching, but still it's not like comedy movies can't be shot well. The Big Lebowski is evidence enough of that. Now you might be saying, really Shane? Really? Trash talking a movie for being low budget? Come on man, you have to make compromises when lacking funds. Now that would be a valid point, if it were actually low budget. The film was made on a $35 million budget. Granted, the actors probably ate up a sizable amount of it. Brennan himself was paid a quarter of the budget at $10 million. However, that's just no excuse. Here's your daily reminder that Godzilla Minus One was made for $15 million. Hello? The first Evil Dead movie was made for less than $400,000, and that film is 10 times better in terms of visual composition. So how did this happen? How does a movie have millions to spare but cheaps out on a grand scale? Well, I have a theory. I believe this movie's budget was hilariously mishandled. Wasted on stupid stuff that doesn't matter instead of the necessary components that would have improved the quality of the movie. In the audio commentary featuring director Roger Kumble alongside Brendan and Brooke, who play Dan and his wife respectively, Roger has this to say.
And this was, I felt bad for actually Steven, our production designer, because we spent about $50,000 to make the water on this waterfall.
$50,000 on a bloody waterfall. And it's not like it's being used as a backdrop for a particularly memorable scene or anything like that. This is literally the one time we see this stupid thing. It serves no purpose. And that's just the waterfall. The whole house was custom built for this movie, so imagine how much they blew on the bloody thing. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, yeah, it wasn't cheap. It's such a waste too, because the house is far from the centerpiece of the movie. Most of the memorable gags happen outside of it. And even the ones that take place inside could have been done with any other building. With all of that being said though, I mean, the scenes depicting Dan vs the animals are far and away the best, most funniest parts of the movie, and probably the reason why I ended up having such a good time watching it in the first place. It's going to be hard trying to convince you guys on my perspective given that I just shat on the film for being cheap and lazy, but hear me out, okay? Like I stated earlier, Brendan carries the majority of the film, and I think he does a spectacular job selling the hell out of the slapstick. For his reactions are priceless to watch, and the guy knows how to deliver even the dumbest of lines. Plus it helps that a lot of the laugh out loud scenes are backed up with successful comedic timing. Take for instance the scene where Dan goes for a drive to once again meet up with Neil Lyman. The raccoon stands directly in the road, forcing him to come to a sudden stop, thus spilling hot coffee all over himself. Cue the high-pitched microphone-peaking scream, deafening both the audience and Lyman on the other end of the phone, which, I'll admit, got a good chuckle out of me. Eventually Dan gets frustrated enough to the point where he tries to run down the little pest, narrowly avoiding an oncoming boulder. We get this Old West stare down between the two, and just when you think the scene has reached its climax, boom! Like I don't know, man. There's only so many ways I could tell you it's humorous. It only gets funnier too. He disconnects from Lyman on the phone again, which is a running joke throughout the whole scene, and once he finally reconnects to him, that bloody cliffside just spontaneously combusts. I mean, this is only one scene, there are a bunch more like it, most of which are genuinely funny and quite an honest laugh out of me. Maybe I just have the sense of humour of a 10-year-old, or I'm just too biased by nostalgia, but the physical comedy is just simply put fucking hilarious. It might be better if I just show you.
Therapy went well. Progress on Unit 3. I was thinking about laying some pipe. Yes, sir. I'll call you back!
Aside from the well thought out scenes between the animals and Dan, there's not really a method to the madness in terms of the comedic elements at play here. A lot of the jokes simply amount to random equals funny or loud noise equals funny. Hence why the film got a lot of criticism for its low-brow humour. To which I'd say, why is that a bad thing? It's not artful or highbrow, sure, but it's not trying to be. Quite frankly, this kind of humour is funny for just about everyone. I don't care who you are. We've been laughing at Funny Man Fall Down since we were cavemen. I don't see why we should stop now. To emphasise just how random the humour is, let's go back to that road scene between Dan and the raccoon. Before slamming the brakes to avoid the boulder, he yells, "Miley Cyrus!" And after hearing that, naturally you'd assume, oh, giant boulder, they must be referencing Wrecking Ball. Because, you know, giant balls wrecking things, you know. But keep in mind, the Wrecking Ball song came out in 2013. Furry Revengenace dropped 3 years prior to this, so Dan just yells Miley Cyrus for no discernible reason. Even Brendan was befuddled by this choice dialogue.
It's a funny
But
joke.
I know it's a funny joke, but why does Dan choose Miley Cyrus out of all?
Because it's fun. You said Lady Gaga. That was your idea. I don't know. They're just funny words.
I guess I can't complain too much because I do find this type of humour, well, humorous at times. In this film, the results are varied. Sometimes there can be funny outcomes, but a lot of the time it leads to cringe. And weird, borderline racist Indian jokes. First Paul Blart and now this. These early 2010s movies can't help but make fun of Indians for some reason. Anyways, while all that madness with Dan is taking place, we get 2 B plots with his wife and son. And let me tell you man, that stuff is boring. Seriously, Tammy and Tyler are both given a pretty listless performance, making any attempt at humour rather void, because there's no physical comedy between these two characters, which is the film's one saving grace. I mean, you can imagine just how dry it is compared to the scenes with Dan. Thankfully, their screen time is rather brief compared to Brendan's, so it's not too bad. Tammy gets a job as a school teacher in the local neighbourhood and through some contrivance gets roped into planning the local forest festival because no one else wants to do it. You know, never mind the fact that she's new to the area and doesn't give a damn about the environment in the first place. Her motivations need to change for the sake of the plot, even if it doesn't make much sense. The same goes for Tyler, who, like Tammy, doesn't care much, if at all, about the environment or the animals. This changes once he meets a tree-hugging, nature-loving girl at school named Amber, whom he starts dating. I guess this change in motivation, you know, makes sense at least. A man wants to get laid after all. But for Tammy, that crap just comes out of nowhere. Eventually, Tyler invites Amber to his house for some one-on-one Wii Sports bonding.
Ooh, that just hit the ball, boy.
Are they stupid? First of all, there is no ball boy in Wii Sports Tennis, you
Stupid imbeciles.
And second of all, the Mii's are supposed to be mute, so where did that bloody noise come from? I mean, they're shown playing Wii Sports right then and there, so I don't know how they managed to get it so wrong. So after continuous instances of Dan acting up, alongside declaring that the animals are out to get him, Tammy decides that the dude is just bloody mental, forcing him to go to therapy in what is admittedly a pretty good scene. They casted Wallace Shawn as the therapist, and I love how he plays him as a sarcastic, unserious guy who is absolutely done with Dan's shit. He gets him to do this bogus Rorschach test, which he inevitably fails. Meanwhile, in the background, the animals take control of his car and start crashing into stuff. Dan appears crazy to the therapist, but we all know what's going on. That dichotomy results in some genuinely funny gags that might get a hearty chuckle or two out of you. I think the more I admit I found this film funny, the more my credibility as someone who talks about film goes down, but well, there's no going back now. So after therapy is a bust, Dan continues to be paranoid about animals, and it's revealed by Tyler through some random book he found that his current situation is not anything new. What Dan is going through is apparently a highly documented phenomenon. Whenever people try and occupy or deforest Rocky Springs, the animals step in to stop them. This keeps Dan even more on edge now that his worst fears have been confirmed. Thankfully, fortune starts to shine in his favour as one of his traps manages to capture the raccoon. Well, not the raccoon. It's just a toy which lures Dan out to be attacked by a giant bear whilst hiding in a porta potty. This scene is actually rather infamous. Not because of the contents of it, but because of the behind the scenes context. It's no secret that Brendan Fraser was in a crappy position as a Hollywood actor at the time, signing on for garbage project after garbage project as that was the only work he could get. It was during this scene in particular where he was at his worst, experiencing a sort of existential crisis which he's talked about both in interviews and even in the bloody audio commentary.
I think it was the night that I was shooting a scene wherein I was being mauled by a bear, and I was in a porta potty, and the porta potty got inverted, and I was on my head, and all this Gatorade and stuff dropped on my head, and it made me have a conversation with myself really quick about, is this worth it? Maybe I should reprioritize. Oh man, I was so not liking my life right there and then.
The fact that Brendan wasn't in a great mindset whilst making the movie kind of adds a layer of guilt to my enjoyment of it. Though, to be fair, it's not like goofy roles or anything new for the actor. George of the Jungle is one of his more famous roles after all, but still, it kinda irks me. I don't know. Skipping forward a tad, Dan finally manages to capture the raccoon and with the help of local law enforcement, puts all of the animals in captivity. Which pisses off both Amber and Tyler. With his newfound peace, he proposed the idea for his company to sponsor the local forest festival in a bid to win over the Indian investors' favour. Naturally pissing off Tammy. By the time of the festival, his family pretty much hates his guts. But now, the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm sure, Dan's come to Jesus moment. I mean, this is a family movie after all, it's gotta have a happy ending. Dan goes to visit the raccoon in captivity where he sees that everything he did to him was to protect his own family. Of course, after witnessing this, Dan realises his folly, releasing the animals who then go on to sabotage the festival in this epic final sequence between the animals and the humans. Lyman's plans are thwarted, Dan's family love him again, and from then on he decides to become a forest ranger to protect Rocky Springs. Thus concluding the movie. Cue the annoying credits where the cast sing Insane in the Membrane for some reason. Okay, there's a lot wrong with this. Remember when I said that the environmental message was ham-fisted? I say that primarily because of the characters and their faux eco-friendly passion, which just isn't convincing in the slightest. Amber is the only character who genuinely gives a damn about the environment here. Remember, Tyler is only invested so he can get some poontang from Amber. Well, as for Tammy, well, I don't even know what's going on in her case. She goes from listening to city ambience in bed because she misses Chicago so much, to being passionate about the authenticity of the Forest Festival. It's clear the film's intention was to show the cast steadily warming up to the environment over the course of the running time, even agreeing to live there when Dan becomes a forest ranger. But this motivational transition is semi-non-existent. We barely see the characters shift in perspective. They are one way one moment and different the next. Plus that would make even less sense considering Dan becoming a park ranger was a last minute addition. The movie originally ended right after they saved the day.
We tested the movie and it was like, what happened to the animals at the end? And
We got
and
forest
Dan, and what
toys.
happened to Dan? Was Dan unemployed? So we just quickly did this.
So, as we've learned throughout this video, Furry Vengeance is not a good movie at all. By every metric, this film fails spectacularly. The cinematography is flat, a lot of the acting is listless, the plot is dull, the eco-friendly message is half-baked at best, the characters' motivations make no sense, the VFX is all over the place, and so on and so forth. You'd think after all that it would be an easy write-off, but no. At the end of the day, I enjoyed my time in this movie and I can't take that away. Primarily because of the acting from Brendan and the physical comedy being mostly on point. Maybe it's just me. Maybe it's just the fact that I have rosy memories of watching it as a kid. But if you grew up in the late 2000s to early 2010s and you find slapstick and or lowbrow comedy as hilarious as I do, then you might get something out of it. Some genuine, well-earned laughs. Either that or it might be an interesting watch out of morbid curiosity, to witness just how bad a film can actually get. Watch at your own discretion. Whether you think I have a point, or you think I'm utterly insane in the membrane, I guess I can't really blame you either way. With that being said, that's all I have to say on Furry Vengeance. Like if you liked, dislike if you disliked, subscribe for more quality content, and I'll see you guys next time.
Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. Have some more chicken. Have some more pie. It doesn't matter if it's boiled or fried.